to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Pastor Steve Andrews.
Today we read Daniel chapter 5, and it gives us the opportunity to actually explore the lines of kings outside of God's people from foreign nations. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand, and the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, "O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation." Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I've heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty, and because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored." Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed, and this is the writing that was inscribed, Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night Belshazzar the Chaldean king was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. This is the word of the Lord. All right, I told you we'd get to look at the lineage of foreign kings, so let's start right at the top. King Belshazzar, who is he? Well, he is described in the text as being the son of Nebuchadnezzar, that Nebuchadnezzar is his father. So Nebuchadnezzar is one of the great Babylonian kings in history, reigned from 605 BC until 562 BC. Arguably, the way you should read father and son in this text is much like how you would read it of the patriarchs of Israel. That Jesus, even in the New Testament, talks about how their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and generations after would talk about them that way as well. That means, and historically this has been used this way, that father-son is the picture of descendants. So Belshazzar is a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. And in this sense, let me walk you through the history that's recorded. It makes sense for us as we walk through this why Belshazzar does not offer this interpreter for himself the second place in his kingdom. If he's king, he can give that away, right? But he doesn't. He offers the third place, and he does that because he's second, and he doesn't want to give that up. So let's look at this. Nebuchadnezzar reigns from 605 to 562. At his death, his son, Marduk, takes over from 562 until 560. So not very long for Marduk. He's assassinated by his brother-in-law. That would be one of the men that married one of the daughters of Nebuchadnezzar. That man is Neriglissar. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Neriglissar. Neriglissar reigns from 560 until 556. So he's the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. At his death, which seems natural, his son Labashi Marduk takes over. Notice how Marduk is in the name of both two of these guys so far. Marduk, one of the Babylonian gods, so they're being named after their false gods. So he's the son of Labashi Marduk, son of Neriglissar, and thus, by family, grandson to Nebuchadnezzar. He reigns in 556. Nabonidus is going to take over the throne in 556, not by his own choice. So Nabonidus is another of the sons-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. His daughter married this man. And it is Nabonidus' son, Belshazzar, who then is the grandson to Nebuchadnezzar. His son is the one who killed Labashi Marduk, assassinated him to give the throne to his father Nabonidus. Nabonidus seems to want nothing to do with any of this and self-exiles himself out of the picture, out of the way. And so Belshazzar steps to the throne and acts as king in his father's place. But again, he is third in line. So 556 to 539, Belshazzar gets to enjoy, well, at least part of that time. It's hard to say when Nabonidus exiled himself, but at least part of that time Belshazzar gets to enjoy basically being king. So he's second in command, Nabonidus technically first as long as he lives. And this is why Belshazzar is able to offer the third place in his kingdom. All right, so we return to the text, having now explored our kings, that Belshazzar is the grandson by birth of the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Belshazzar makes a feast for 1,000 lords and drinks wine in front of them. Not a humble start, right? Not a great intro for Belshazzar. And after tasting the wine, he decides to command that all the vessels that have been stolen from the temple of God in Jerusalem, that was torn down by Nebuchadnezzar in the conquering of Jerusalem and carried back to Babylon, stored in the house of Nebuchadnezzar's gods, like Bel and Marduk, that those vessels be brought out and that they drink wine from them together, everyone at this party. You might ask your children, what's the problem with this? This is an important part of Old Testament culture to understand. Those vessels are holy. Not holy as in they're perfect, but holy as in they are set apart. Those are the two definitions we use for holy. They're set apart for a specific purpose. To use them for anything other than to serve the Lord, Yahweh, in his temple, well, it's not good. It is profaning the holy things of God, punishable by death. As you see elsewhere in the Old Testament as you read through some of the things that happen. I mean, even to touch the Ark of the Covenant, one of those holy things. Who touched it? He was trying to catch it. It might have been another Uriah. I can't recall specifically. So he reached out to touch it, and he died. The Lord struck him dead for touching the holy thing that was the throne of God. These are not the throne of God. These are different utensils and bowls and things that would have been used in the service of the Lord's house with the various sacrifices, offerings, the flagon, for example, on the table of presence, the bread of the presence, the dishes that may have been used in that place. So they're using them for their own ritual, their own fun, their own pleasure, and they're worshiping pagan gods as they do. Not good. And as they do this, all of a sudden a hand, a free-floating hand, appears before them and starts writing on the wall. And it does so in front of a lampstand. Now, that could be the golden lampstand, pilfered out of the temple of God, or it could just be any lampstand that belongs to Belshazzar, the king. So, the picture then here that we see is that it is well lit. Everyone in the room has the ability to see this thing happening. They see the hand, they see the writing going up on the wall, and everyone's perplexed. The king is terrified. His color changes. So this is a picture of like when you get ready to faint, your skin tone just grows pale real fast. Everything, it's like the blood just leaves him, drains out of him. He's alarmed, he's afraid. His limbs give way, so he becomes weak to the point of falling again. His knees are knocking together. That's the picture of fear and trembling that we often see. And he calls his enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, men that his father had trusted before him, that they would interpret what is going on for him. He offers them wealth. Purple is expensive. Only royalty, really, or the very richest of people had purple clothing. A chain of gold around his neck, so that's expensive too. And third ruler in the kingdom, Nabonidus, Belshazzar, and then the interpreter. Purple, by the way, expensive because just the rarity of the dye needed to make the color purple at that time in history. No one can do it, just like no one could help Nebuchadnezzar with his dreams before except for Daniel. And so in comes the queen. Interesting phrase here. Is this Belshazzar's bride, or is this Nabonidus' bride, making this his mother? The text here not specific, just queen. And she comes in, live forever, blesses her husband or blesses her son. Now, she obviously is not convinced that Yahweh is God alone. She says something Nebuchadnezzar said earlier in chapter 4, that there is a man in whom the spirit of the holy gods. Not God, not singular, but plural. So, polytheistic culture again. She praises Daniel, says that Nebuchadnezzar loved him, made him chief of all. He could interpret dreams. That's the big one, right? That's what's happening here. Explaining riddles, solving problems. Let Daniel be called, he will show you. And so Belshazzar listens. Belshazzar summons Daniel, acknowledges who he is, says, I have heard of you. Right? Just now. He's just heard of him. I've heard of you and basically what you can do. If you can read, I will give you all this reward. Daniel's response is, keep it. I don't want any of that. Very humble response there, but at the same time bold, right? To refuse a king's gift is a bold and dangerous thing to do. But Daniel not only does that, he then boldly speaks all the more that he's going to interpret it nonetheless. The rest of that paragraph from 18 onward describes what we saw yesterday in chapter 4, that God alone gave Nebuchadnezzar his kingdom, his greatness, his glory, his majesty. Everything Nebuchadnezzar had came from the Lord, and that God gave him the power of the sword, Romans 13, so that Nebuchadnezzar could kill who he wanted or keep alive who he wanted. He had the authority to do that. And he had the power to. So the authority from God to act in such a way, but also the ability to carry it out because of his greatness in this world. But when Nebuchadnezzar was prideful, God stripped it all away and gave it temporarily to another. It was until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom, setting over it whom he will. That is when Nebuchadnezzar returns to his throne, after he's been humbled, after he repents of his pride. You, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. Belshazzar was alive and in the royal family at the time everything that was just described happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He saw it. He lived it. But he did not fear the word of God. He did not honor the things that had happened in his family tree, right? To grandpa, to his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar. So instead, he's done this evil thing, and he has praised false gods as he polluted, defiled, profaned the holy things of Yahweh from the temple. You praise the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, who do not see or hear or know, which do not, I should say. Ask your children, why not? Why don't the gods of silver and gold hear or see or know? It's not a hard answer. Hopefully your children can get it pretty quick. They're not real. They can't see because they don't exist. They can't hear because they're not there. They can't know because, again, they're not real. But God, in whose hand is your breath. So every breath we breathe is a gift from the Lord. And that's something in your prayers today as a family you can give thanks for, right? Every breath you take. Thank you, Lord, for another breath. Thank you, Lord, for another day. Thank you, Lord, for another meal. Thank the Lord for his daily provisions, his daily love and goodness to you and your family. You have not honored this God, is the word Daniel speaks against Belshazzar. So he interprets the writing, and it's just 4 words. It's not a long message. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Mene repeated twice, so emphasis on this one. God has numbered the days of your kingdom, brought it to an end. God has numbered the days of your kingdom, brought it to an end. This is not going to be changed. God will not be dissuaded. This is set in stone. This will happen. This will come to pass. Number the days of your kingdom, just like the Lord has numbered all the hairs on your head even before you were born, right? He knows how many hairs you have up there. So it is here. The Lord knew the number of days that the Babylonian kings would see before they were even alive, let alone kings. And Belshazzar's days are down to 1. This is it. This is his last. Tekel gets at the idea of the old ancient scales that people would use for trading. You'd put what you wanted to trade on one side, what you wanted in return on the other side, and see if they balanced out okay. This judgment of God. He has weighed Belshazzar and found him wanting. This is true of all mankind, right? I mean, this is Romans 3 and Romans 5, that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But Belshazzar, unrepentant. And that's going to be his destruction, his downfall. Perez actually can be from the Hebrew language as well, so maybe an imported word from one language to the other. I'm not sure. Again, we're in Aramaic right now until, chapter 7? Perez, your kingdom is divided. It is being taken away from Belshazzar and will be given to others. That will happen 2 verses from now. Belshazzar, even though this is such a negative interpretation, praises Daniel, gives him the reward, makes him 3rd ruler in the kingdom. When the kingdom's about to be invaded and destroyed that night, I don't think you want to be 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Maybe that's why Daniel told him to keep the gifts. Didn't want a target on his back from this. But regardless, Belshazzar gives it to him, and then Belshazzar is killed. This is 539 BC, when the kingdom falls. Darius the Mede steps in, which brings us to the other kingdom here, Persia. This might be Cyrus. It's hard to say, so going by a different name from different languages is a possibility here. The Darius that historically is known is not going to be around. Well, he's probably alive. He's not going to reign until 522. He's a distant relative to Cyrus, who is the one who takes over. So you can read about Cyrus in Ezra chapter 1, how the overthrow of Babylon is God's command. God commanded Cyrus to do it. So most likely we should be taking this Darius the Mede, and then the next chapter as well, perhaps, to be a reference to Cyrus the Great, the first Persian king over Babylon in their history. That's what we have for today. The Lord's peace be with you.